In other news, the IPCC is defending its research again, this time against revelations that its prediction in its landmark 2007 report on climate change that Himalayan glacier ice would disappear completely by 2035 had no science behind that claim. Here with more on this developing story is Clean Sky's Dan Goldstein. So Dan, what is the IPCC accused of here?
Well, basically right now it's nothing more than sloppy research, but that, of course, Susan, could change very quickly. Now keep in mind, especially this comes after the University of East Anglia's email debacle, obviously, which put a great deal of pressure on the IPCC because it relied on that data. Now again, we have yet another data point in that 2007 report that appears to be flawed. Now keep in mind, Susan, remember, this IPCC report, the 2007 report, was the landmark basis that basically everything climate-wise, Copenhagen, you name it, was based on. Now, of course, that report was shared or was the basis of the Nobel Prize that was awarded to the IPCC and Al Gore. Now, here's what the IPCC report in 2007 said 3 years ago about those Himalayan glaciers. They said 500,000 square kilometers worth of glaciers in the Himalayas are, quote, receding faster than in any part of the world, and if the present rate continues, the likelihood of them disappearing by the year 2035 and perhaps sooner could be upon us. Now, that, of course, was blamed solely on global warming. The reason why this was so important is that claim was significant because millions of Chinese, Nepalese, and Indian people along the rivers beneath the Himalayas depend on water for those glaciers, and they were worried tremendously about droughts and famine. But where did this information come from? That was the key thing. It was not a peer-reviewed study, but merely an informal comment from an Indian researcher in June of 1999 in a magazine called New Scientist. Now, the World Wildlife Federation picked that up in its report in 2005 on Himalayan glaciers, and there it made it into the IPCC report. But, as we said before, the scientist behind the comment said he was just speculating and did no formal research. Now, here's what Rajendra Pachauri said about that today. He said, okay, let's say we slipped up on one of these numbers. I don't think it takes anything away from the overwhelming scientific evidence of what's happening with the climate on this earth. And of course, he made those comments today in Abu Dhabi talking to reporters. He, however, has promised a full investigation, but there are some concerns certainly from India, and this is what the Indian minister Jairam Ramesh had to say, quote, the IPCC has a lot of answering to do on how it reached the 2035 figure, which has created such a scare. Now, bottom line, Susan, that does not mean that there is no evidence of glacier ice retreating from the Himalayas. In fact, the World Wildlife Fund was very specific that there is evidence of that. In fact, the Khumbu Glacier that was used to summit Mount Everest in 1953 by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. That was his Sherpa guide. Basically, that they have noticed that glacier, the Khumbu Glacier, has retreated more than 5 kilometers, about 2.5 miles, since 1953. And keep in mind, too, they've also noted that since the mid-1970s, Susan, the average air temperature at 49 stations in the Himalayas has risen by 1 degree centigrade, and that's twice what they've noticed in surrounding areas. So even though there's this issue of when, there isn't the question of if, Susan.
Right. So what are the critics saying right now about the IPCC and its report?
Well, here's the one thing that you keep in mind is in the University of East Anglia email issue, the IPCC went back and said, look, that's only one database that we're relying on. We've got 3 others. In this case, they really don't have that leg to stand on because it's beginning to emerge too, Susan, that some scientists, even IPCC scientists, were telling Rajendra and the report, basically the assemblers of the report, don't put this timeline in. In fact, George Kaiser, who is an expert in tropical glaciology at the University of Innsbruck at Austria, and he's also an IPCC scientist who helped assemble the report, he told the French wire service today, quote, it is so wrong that it's not even worth discussing. Susan.
Wow. All right. Dan Goldstein, thanks for that report.